Hi, everyone. Welcome to Guiding Voices, the podcast where mentors share their wisdom, journeys, and strategy shaping futures of learning and leadership across Africa and beyond. Today, we are honored to have a powerhouse of intellect and innovation. His name is Dr. Busayo Aworunshe. I'll try not to call him his nickname, considering we've come a long way. Dr. Aworunshe holds a PhD in Industrial and Systems Engineering and is a certified PMP. And he currently works as a patent engineer at USPTO. For people that don't know that, is the United States Patent and Trademark Office, as well as is a managing partner at Benveria Holdings USA, where he drives real estate, construction, and development at scale. So with expertise spanning patent engineering, Lean Six Sigma, pardon me there, supply chain and logistics, process improvement, automation, data analytics, Dr. Busayo blends technical precision with visionary leadership. So, from Nigeria to global stage, his journey through engineering, entrepreneurship, and strategic leadership is both inspiring and instructive. I am inspired, by the way. So, get ready to dive into a conversation that is full of practical insights and bold perspectives and mentorship that transcends many boundaries. So, Dr. Busayo, you're welcome. I'll try not to call you your nickname.
Feel
And thank you. No, we're not going to do that on camera. We can do that behind cameras. But anyways, welcome. It's good to see someone that you went from undergrad and now you both hold PhDs again in engineering, but in different spaces, by the way. So I'm excited about this to sit down with you about your journey through from electrical, and then you just landed just like that in real estate and just like that in patency. And I just wanted to say I'm inspired and I also want to learn a lot. So I know from your journey from Nigeria to becoming a PhD holder, patent engineer in the US, it's been a lot. So can you take us back to the beginning? What fueled your earlier passion for engineering and global impact?
So yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the intro. Means a lot. For me, I would say everything started with one powerful force, which I call curiosity. I've always had a deep desire to understand how things work, and more importantly, how they could work better. Growing up in Nigeria, I asked endless of questions, and I was a very naturally inquisitive person, and I naturally gravitated towards, problem solving. But I'll be honest, I've never been, great at sitting through long traditional lectures. As you know, even back in school, I never used to. I like coming for classes, In fact, I don't have a very long attention, span for lectures. I get very restless quickly. That's why even back at OAU, you more likely will find me playing FIFA, PlayStation, than me sitting in a 2-hour chemistry class in a Jose or something, So I've always preferred learning by doing, reading, and experimenting on my own terms. That self-guided curiosity. Um, it became my compass, overall in life and shaped how I absorb, apply, and share knowledge in general. With that being said, I've also learned that, there must be a balance. While independently learning is powerful, you know, um, we also, must learn to, respect the process in general. There's also value in structure, value in mentorship, value in discipline. Some lessons only come when you sit through uncomfortable situations, and some doors will, only open when you respect the process. So I've learned how to stretch myself, how to merge my natural curiosity with the structure required to grow. And that balance between curiosity and discipline, has carried me throughout my career and through various leadership roles in several multinational organizations. And it also led me to step out of my comfort zone back then to pursue a PhD in industrial and systems engineering while holding a full-time job. So it was one of my most demanding seasons because I had to juggle between working full time, doing research, and having my regular job at my company back then at Honeywell. But it also taught me that you don't wait to be ready. You build readiness along the way in general. So today I operate between the intersection of engineering, innovation, intellectual property, and real estate in general. So I've learned one thing over across the part is that um, you don't have to fit in a mold to be impactful. What you need is the courage to begin, the curiosity to grow, and the discipline to keep going, especially when things get very hard. So for everyone listening, for every young African person listening, I would say stay curious, challenge the norm, but also respect the process. Because the future belongs to those who, you know, I wouldn't say play it safe, but they also, are bold enough to think differently and, work wisely and productively.
So my next question, you talk a lot about curiosity. Would you have would you have been this curious if you had your first degree abroad, like in the United States?
Um, I would say curiosity. That's more of it's not about education. It's not about only education. You must be naturally curious in general. You have people whereby not they didn't necessarily uh, have a formal degree, but they are naturally interested. They want to know things, how things work. So I would say, to me, it was more of it's more of an inbuilt thing than something taught between the four walls of education
Yeah,
institute.
I understand that too, but sometimes our environment sometimes also answers some questions, and an environment sometimes leave you questioning some things. So there are basic questions some kids will not ask because of the environment where they grew up. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do actually, and I see where you're coming from. Culture also goes a long way. In things like this. For example, what we are coming from, especially, it's sometimes like deemed disrespectful to challenge your professor's notion. But what I've learned over time is being in an environment where you can challenge the norm while still being respectful goes a long way. And back in school, then you can't challenge a professor on some things. You might come across as being disrespectful. So that's why I said overall there needs to be a balance between questioning the norm and also respecting the norm. There just needs to be a balance. I don't know if that makes sense.
It makes sense actually, because the truth is that when the learning space is safe, it's going to unlock curiosity, and curiosity always unlocks learning. So that's the link. But unfortunately, obviously, in some classrooms or in some professors' classroom, fear is the only thing that works, and that way curiosity cannot be unlocked. So it's about feeling safe, and that's why I said it that sometimes our environment sometimes could also have effect on our curiosity, positively or negatively. Some people
Yeah,
have, yeah, whichever way.
yeah, and I'm gonna add to that. Sometimes when people transition over from the environment and come to the Western world, for example, for school, there might be a culture shock that comes in, on things. I know I experienced, that myself, in general. So many students, when we transition here, the way things are done might be different, especially, when you're in a situation whereby exams might just come at the end, you know. Back here, what I noticed was that when I was schooling here, the assignments are just piling up. They're piling up over time. Whereby every class there's an assignment coming. You know, so those culture shock, psychological shock, and systemic shock can also come into the equation while schooling here. It's a good thing actually, because at the end of the day, you're not waiting till the end. You're not like backloading things whereby you're just waiting till the exam comes that before you study or before you do your own preparation. So yeah.
To patency. So sorry. When it comes to patency, it's a long reading. It's you reading through pages and pages, and you naturally don't like to sit still. You know where my question is going. you, you naturally don't like to sit still. How do you cope?
Um, I would say I don't like to sit still.
And no, and
You
sorry, let me
know,
tell you where I'm coming from.
I know, I know.
I'm also coming from a space where I just want people to know that they do not have a problem.
Yeah, I know
And
that. I
I
get that.
also want to Africans also to realize that we don't have a problem if you are
Different.
a certain kind of way. Number
Yeah,
one, it's obvious you're a kinesthetic learner. You learn by touching things and moving around. So if a typical kinesthetic learner will put a book on the floor and raise their leg up and their head down and they're studying and they're good. But you know where we come from, you can just you might get caned a lot
yeah.
for having to can you just sit still, you know? So I'm just asking you, how do you then sit still to read through patent?
Well,
Um
for me, it actually merges into my own strong suits because I'm learning it on my own terms. You know, I'm picking it up. I'm not sitting in a 2-hour lecture where someone is trying to explain something, to me the way they think it should be said. I'm taking the paper, digesting it. That's how I learn. So for me, it's a perfect blend on my interests, my abilities, and getting things done. So in general, so that's a perfect blend. That's what I'd say.
Well, I just wanted to ask that question just for you people to understand that because on our social pages we always say something that everybody has a dominant learning style. But over time you have to develop the other
Yeah,
ones. So despite the fact that back there undergrad, exam time you still sit down. And let me say this on air: you were one of those people that had those big textbooks that used to scare me in the first year. At Obafemi Awolowo University, and I'm like, God, this guy knows so much. Why does he have so much textbook? And then I'm just scared. Like all these boys know just a lot of things. But anyways, um, that was good to hear that you do it on your own terms, and I think that's amazing. That's amazing. Even for me, that I can still sit still, I still do publication, I still write, I still do. Sometimes I'm just tired. Like I'm just really really tired. Some weeks I just even just want to read any paper. But anyways, we still do it anyways. Now, to my next questions. I know you don't like to answer this question, but I would ask you. I know you do a
okay.
whole lot of work helping people to move out of West Africa to the west. You don't like to do it on camera. You just do it backhand, and you keep smiling about it even when we talk about it. What inspired you to take some initiative into your own hands?
Um, I'll say, overall, I believe in the power of access. I've seen how transformative it can be when just one person is given the opportunity to rise. And there's no shortage of brilliance across the African continent. What is often missing isn't the talent. It's exposure. Mentorship, funding, and or even simply someone to say you can do this, and here's how. I've realized that early on that waiting for large institutions to solve problems wasn't just enough. So I decided to be a part of the solution, directly, practically, and consistently. That's why, I personally supported others, maybe academically, emotionally, financially into, getting into graduate programs in the US, Canada. It can come by just, editing essays. Sometimes it might be about, helping draft, resumes or something. But, every time it's like an act of belief whereby I'm not just helping them, earn degrees, I'm helping them unlock global platforms to build confidence and come back with, come back to lead. And here's the thing, don't I don't do it because I have excess. I do it because I understand, as I mentioned, the value of access in general. So supporting African students in pursuing graduate studies isn't just about education. It's about building a pipeline of global competent leaders who can show up anywhere in the world with the confidence to lead, build, and transform systems. So overall, for me, it's about leverage. Where you support one person, you're not just changing that person's life, but you're helping, change every community they go on to impact, and that's an exponential return, and that's what I call a good legacy.
That's absolutely amazing because, and that's going to bring me to my next questions. And I just wanted to make a comment on that. That we guys started from conversations that I've had with graduate students transitioning from West Africa or from Africa in general to come study in the West. Before I say mine, I will share one after you're done. I just wanted you to share some of the challenges you've seen students face when they're trying to make that transition from Africa to the West.
Um, what I would say, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it earlier. I would say it's it's all about access to information. That goes a long way, and there's always that the transition from African universities to Western institution. It can be a very exciting thing, but yet can, if you're not careful, you can get very disorientating because one of the biggest challenges is not just about the academic shift. There's the cultural aspect, there's the psychological aspect, there's the systemic, shift. You know, from an academic adjustment standpoint, many students, at least back then, and I remember, by default, many students were trained to memorize things. They call it la cram la po. Just cram it in and just throw it down. While that might work in the institutions back in when we were there, the Western institutions emphasize lots of critical thinking, lots of classroom participation and self-directed learning. Back then you can be in your own shell, and still get an A, and everybody hails you, yeah, you were, it's like that. But here it's a totally, it can be very different, and that shift can be, overwhelming if you're not careful. And there's also something called, I call it, people call it imposter syndrome, whereby even very intelligent and very highly capable students sometimes can question if they belong, especially when you're surrounded by peers who speak differently, we speak more confidently, and they've had access over time, and you feel like sometimes the loudest in the room does not necessarily mean you're the smartest. And coming from, especially when you're coming from different part of the world, that you speak differently, that you think they're not understanding what you're saying. You might have the default inclination to pull back. So but it's not going to work because you have to participate, and you have to yeah, you have to participate. So that's something that some of the challenges that can come in. And also, as we mentioned it before, I call it like eating curriculum, whereby it's not just about you being academically good. You must know how to network. You must know how to approach professors. You must know how to, you must know how to interact. So that's something that it's those soft skills. They're not like it's not something that they're taught between the four walls of an institution. And one other thing that I also see, which it's totally normal, is that many students sometimes there's this um, there's this zeal to I want to make it. So if you're not careful, it can get very emotionally and mentally draining because many students are you end up dealing with isolation, culture shock, and they call it like a pressure, like a big huge pressure, not just for themselves but for families and communities back home. So the mental health is something that is not often talked about, and it's something that I know that now we should talk about it more often. I know that it's something that overall that students, especially people coming in, need to take seriously. So how do we bridge this gap? I would say one, always have a very good mentor, around you, that can offer you, you know, um, practical advice. It's not just about aspire to acquire. Not just about those. Not about inspiration, but people that can give you practical orientation of how the system works, how to have conversations, how to write, resumes. I remember when I first moved here, my first resume, I thought I had drafted the perfect thing. I put date of birth, put sex, put age. And they're like, no, 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 delete that. I should not be, I should not be here. So things that, it was normal, is totally different, here. So those are things that you need to be able to understand. So just overall, the mentors create like a safe space where students can feel seen, supported, and not alone. And finally, what I would say is that you don't need to be perfect to belong. You know, you just need to be prepared and supported. So with the right systems, students don't just survive; they thrive and go on to excel and lead in wherever they find themselves.
Thank you for that. You answered my next question. But
Oh,
you know that I just wanted to add on top of that, especially critical thinking and imposter syndrome. Sometimes that can also be very crippling. I mean, imposter syndrome. But talking about critical thinking, one thing that really propelled WeGuide is the fact that we see that as smart as we as Africans is not translating into innovation because we can make sense of what we know in the classroom. And that is where critical thinking comes into being. So sometimes you sit down with PhDs and masters, and then they'll be like, "Oh, how was your day?" They feel a little sad, and it comes from a conversation maybe they've had with their supervisor, their professors, and they go like, "Oh, my professor asked me this question, I couldn't answer, and when he started to answer, I saw that I knew what he was saying, but I didn't know that was what he was asking." And it's because also we cannot make sense of it. So let me be specific here. So let's look at engineering, for example. We do a whole lot of mathematics and theorems and integrals and stuff like that, all those things. A typical person that knows it so well in African context might not be able to explain the physicality behind it. So how does this translate into the physical environment? So that becomes a problem when you move to the West, because it becomes a question of how does that translates into the physical space. So thank you for that. That was very very wholesome in engineering. So now that you operate in the intersection of engineering and and technology and business, those three things. That's what would you say is one of the best skills for African youths to have? Now you touched on something very briefly, um, but I just want you. I know you might still talk about it now, and I'll then write on top of it. What are the best skills you think African youth should have? minus social media skills?
Well, one of the most important, I'll call it mindset shifts, and not just even Africa, it's just, I would say emerging professionals, in general, um, is, I would say, understanding the power of technology, especially AI in this world at the moment. I would say don't it's not just a tool for automation, it's more like a catalyst to, elevate oneself. To many people, they treat AI or even, as a copy and paste tool, but that's just the surface level. And in this, with the trajectory the world is going, even from, academics, from the industry, the power lies in how to think, critically with AI, and not just, use it as a copy and paste tool. So what I mean is that, in this time, I would say AI would not take your job or take your, replace things, but someone who knows how to critically think, innovate, and adapt their ideas and skills using the tool of AI will. So if you're a student or a young professional today, don't ask yourself, oh, well, yeah, I'm just going to copy this thing on ChatGPT or whatever AI tool to give me that answer. No, you need to ask, okay, how can I use this to rethink the problem and, make me more efficient? So I would say the future does not belong to those who can memorize answers and, read it and pour it down. No, but those who, can ask better questions and use, AI as a partner in solving them. So I would say, train your mind to lead and not just follow. That's why you can stay irreplaceable. So I said this not just it's not just about students, but even working professionals in general.
Yeah, thank you. And that's in. Let me tell you a funny joke. A student of mine did an assignment, and then was going to copy from ChatGPT to submit to me. And you know that question that after ChatGPT replies you and says, would you, would you like me to? And then it's
Yeah,
submitted where I was like, what a wahoo. How can you just not read through your answers even before you copy and paste? I mean, that's absolutely interesting. There was another one that also wrote an email to me with ChatGPT. And you know that ChatGPT will tell you that in the square you should put the name of the professor inside there.
um,
And the person did not remember to put my name inside. So that's another gist on ChatGPT. So like you said, above all, no matter the tool you're using, you still have to put in the work.
yeah. And just to add to that, in general, once upon a time, students relied on four-figure tables. Those thick books that has a lot of trigonometric values. If you're in school during those era, you remember how much time it took just to compute, values. Then came calculators. You know, solving problems that took 10 minutes can be solved in seconds. But here's the key here. Calculator did not eliminate the need to understand maths. It only made it work, faster for those who already knew how to think mathematically. So, if you do not know the principles, for example, bot mass, all those things, and you just put everything on your calculator, it's going to give you garbage in, garbage out. That's what you're going to get. You know, so these tools in general only empowers those who already have the fundamental and relevant skills. So I say AI today is like a generational calculator. It's powerful. It can help you accelerate your work, solve your problems, draft document, analyze data, but it does not replace the need for fundamental thinking, domain expertise, and ethical reasoning in general. So just like I'm not calculating to only reason maths, AI should not erase your critical thinking, In fact, it demands better thinking and more precise and more agile to get, the right result.
And that is my cue to tell everybody that the shelf life of maths is long. When people use AI, I always say to them that you have to understand probability and statistics, which is what is in the foundation of AI itself. And for those that do understand it, I mean, the sky is just the beginning for them anyway. So now, to my curious question, I think this one is it's personal, but I don't think it's personal. It's going to be a question also everybody's going to ask. How did you end up in real estate?
Uh, that's a good question. How did I end up in real estate? Well,
Answer for you.
sorry.
My answer for anybody would have been like because you're a kinesthetic learner, you always enjoy anything that allows you to be things you're going to see.
Yeah, true, true, true. But overall, I mentioned one thing was that uh, I I wanted something. I just wanted to do something that was different from my comfort zone. So I did my own learnings, and I realized that okay, what can I what kind of business can I go into that can generate passive income while still taking advantage of relevant tax codes that exist, you know, and real estate was like a perfect blend, because you have depreciations, you can so basically think about it this way. Someone that earns 100 grand from regular W2 job, someone that earns 70 grand from let's say passive income on real estate. By the time you do your taxes and everything, you realize that you're earning even way less. And I mean the person with the W2 now. Because the government will tax you significantly, but from passive income, especially real estate, you do not. There are ways in which the tax codes encourages the business in general to deduct losses, deduct depreciation that helps overall, over time.
Okay. So you've answered my question somehow. But me, if I'm going to answer that question, I'll tell you behind the cameras. I'm not going to say you on I'm not going to say your camera why I would do real estate, which I think it's not a conversation for now. But
Okay.
anyways, it's amazing. Actually, I was really excited. Obviously, when you have somebody that has done something and goes just far away from that, and I just wanted people to know that there is nothing impossible. You can make your transition as close as you can or as far away as you think you can. Okay, for my last and final question, hopefully it's the last. I just hope nothing comes to my mind now. I know you've done a lot on leadership, and I will start by asking what was one mistake you made earlier in your career and later maybe turned into a valuable lesson?
One mistake. Huh. I try not to look at it as I don't call it a mistake. We'll call it lessons learned. That's the way I try to.
And that's why I said that turned out to be a value. At that time, at the time you made the mistake, it would have been a mistake. But now that you're older,
Yeah, I would, yeah, that's why I said for me, I wouldn't necessarily call it a mistake, but I would say there was a season early on that felt incredibly frustrating because I didn't yet see the value in it. When I first moved to the US, it was during the big recession. I thought I was finishing if were you coming over, apply to jobs with my electrical engineering degree, get a job. I thought I had it all figured out. Then reality not, you know. I remember I mentioned then about the resume where I just put date of birth and everything, and all of a sudden I'm just getting rejections left and right. So at the point I did, the economy was so bad, so I ended up getting a job at Kroger as in the daily section. So I was, frying chicken, managing long lines, cleaning off, closing the counter. I was so, I was just like, man, after all my reading and everything, yeah, I am saying, what kind of cheese do you want? No disrespect to anyone doing that job, no disrespect, there. So after that, I worked at, and I went to work at the call center, with T-Mobile, spending hours talking to irate customers, trying to calm them down and trying to solve issues that I did not create. It has nothing to do with me. So at that time, honestly, I felt very stuck. In my head, I had big dreams, I had visions of global career. And yeah, I was, refeeding coleslaw, cutting meat, hanging bread, and it was humbling, but looking back, as I mentioned, it was something that I did not see any value in as of that point in time, but looking back, that season taught me some of the most important skills that I still use today. It taught me how to communicate clearly under pressure, how to listen actively, and how to de-escalate, conflict, and how to stay composed in high stress situations. It gave me people skills, empathy, and emotional intelligence, skills that no technical degree alone can give you in the four walls of an institution. So now, I see that those skills are very, important that I use in my day-to-day career, both in corporate roles, in negotiations, and in business roles. I realize that, being able to solve, problems is one thing, but being able to connect with people, build trust, and navigate through difficult conversations, that's what makes you truly effective in a corporate world. So, if you're in a season that feels unrelated to your big goals, do not discount it. Every experience has a lesson, and every detour can be a preparation. So, sometimes, the most powerful growth doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens behind a deli counter, or on the headset of 9 p.m. when no one is watching. So that's why I said I don't call it a mistake. I call it a learning experience where as of that point in time I discounted the value in it, but over the course of over the course of the years I realized that that experience back then was very important, and I actually made use of those skill sets even in bigger roles.
Yeah. I mean, as we often say, emotional intelligence and social intelligence always supersede IQ at any point in time. And that's one skill that a whole lot of people don't have. And that's why the third class people will always employ the first class people, because the first class rely on IQ and the third class people or the past people rely on social skills and EI. And sometimes we go through these humbling experiences to also be grateful, to be grateful for the highs. At the low valleys, you just realize. Well, for some people, they're never grateful, and I can always say we can never all be grateful at the same level. But I understand what you mean. Mine was after masters, I have master's degree and trying to find a job in England and having to have to work in a shop, um, to get that after going to countless interviews. But here we are, super grateful for everything. So if there's one thing or one principle that has guided you through life, maybe a coach or something that has guided you through life and you would like to share with any African out there, what would that be? Any African student, I should say.
Um, one principle that I would say is learn to fail forward. So, in many environments, especially, in academic ones, we are taught that success is defined by getting it's all right the first time. I've seen, seasons where people take CGPAs as like are treated like as the ultimate measure for worth or potential. While being academically sound is important, I do not discount that. Being academically sound is very important, you know, and something to be proud of. There is also so much more to success than what's on your transcript. That I would tell you categorically. Real growth comes from being tested in real life, in how you solve problems, how you handle pressure, how you adapt when things don't go your way. So failing forward means, you give yourself the permission to try, to miss the mark, but still move forward, in general with, greater clarity, strength, and resilience. So one thing I would say is that, and this is the truth, you don't have to be the smartest person in your class or in the room. You know, what matters is your growth mindset, and your ability to keep up the courage and consistency. So, one thing is don't disqualify yourself because of maybe a stumble. Take the lessons, own your own story, and keep moving. Because the world is, changed by those who dare to grow in general. So that's why I said, learn to feel forward and rise with purpose in general. I know I'm speaking from experience.
Yeah, yeah. Hard work always supersedes talents anytime, anytime. So this is when we draw the curtains on our conversation today. And this is when I brag that we have one of the best mentors in the world. I mean, like if you look at the mentors around the world, we can brag about that at We Guide. That my friends are the best and our mentors are the best. And I just want to say thank you. I know you're extremely busy and we really appreciate the time you have given out. I know you did it for me. You know you did it for me. And I'm going to come book time also to be mentored, obviously. For anyone listening to me, sometimes I still book time with the bosses, with the mentors. Even when I need something like, please put me in your calendar. I want to discuss something with you. And I really appreciate it. Thank you for taking our time. We really appreciate you. And for people that want to know more about We Guide, Learning Initiative, we are a non-profit that helps to bridge the learning gap between the African education system and the Western education system. And we have amazing mentors that have gone through that journey and are willing to help you shorten your distance to success. Basically, there is no advantage in gaining speed in the wrong direction. Come speak to mentors and let them help you guide you. Do you have a closing word for everyone today?
It was a pleasure, being here, and overall, wherever you are in life, just know that, especially those who feel stuck or the state of things are not going, the way it should be. That's why you need to call mentorship, people that have walked the route, and know one thing. I would say you're not behind. You're being, you're not lost. You're learning, and you're not failing. You're forging. So just know that what matters most is to have the vision that pulls you, even when you don't know every turn. You can't. It's okay not to know. But what's not okay is not to have that zeal to move forward. So no one is perfect, but you always learn to take that step one way or the other going forward. That's what I
And thank you everyone for joining today. Have a lovely evening.